Have you ever been dragged into an argument where the other person completely abandons reason? Your chest tightens, your heart rate spikes, and every word feels like walking through mud. You try to rely on basic facts. You lay out a clear, step-by-step rationale. But instead of listening, they dig their heels in. Their worldview locks up, and their thinking becomes completely rigid. We usually look to modern psychology or corporate management consultants to navigate this kind of friction. But the actual framework for disarming these highly toxic personalities is over 2,000 years old. Because logic bounces right off a rigid mind, we need a different operating system, one that neutralizes their hostility without feeding into it. The architect of this system was the ancient Greek playwright Euripides. He did something highly unusual for his time. For 5 of his massive theatrical hits, including Medea and the Bacchae, he copied and pasted the exact same unsettling final lines. His peers took a very different approach to storytelling. Sophocles, for instance, ended his plays by delivering tidy moral lessons, warning the audience against arrogance. Euripides realized that lecturing an arrogant, rigid person accomplishes exactly nothing. His repeated endings sent a much darker message, that the things we expect to happen rarely do, and that logic is a fragile shield against human passion. He turned the physical stage into a laboratory for simulating human behavior. Instead of telling the audience how to be good, he showed them exactly how a rigid, arrogant person destroys themselves when they refuse to adapt to reality. Euripides proved that in the heat of a crisis, human reason is the first thing to shatter. If logic is a brittle tool, he proposed we replace it with a living, biological response, an organic anatomy designed to absorb friction rather than break against it. Think of this as verbal aikido. Instead of a rigid machine, you respond as a fluid biological organism. The first step is identifying their skeleton, the architecture of their belief. Ignore the aggressive words they use as defensive clothing and look for the hidden structure of fear. Once you see that fear, you can locate the exact points where their thought process has frozen up out of panic. Then you establish your skin, the concept of autopoiesis. This is the absolute boundary separating your internal state from their external chaos. When they project anger, a strong psychological skin ensures their hostility hits an unbreachable wall. You observe their emotional virus, but never absorb it. Establishing these internal boundaries is the mandatory baseline. If your skeleton craps or your skin breaks, you will get pulled into their panic, and any attempt at persuasion will fail. With your internal boundary set, you activate your nervous system. This lets you process words in real time, bypassing the urge to use canned defensive responses. You listen to their specific vocabulary and reflect it back to them. You script a mini tragedy tailored to their situation, exposing the irony of their choices. Next comes the circulatory system. In any interaction, energy naturally flows from areas of high to low concentration. Here we see 2 interconnected fluid systems. If you let their anger trigger your own, equalizing the pressure, communication experiences a violent systemic blockage. But if you maintain a high concentration of calm, psychological gravity takes over. Your steady rhythm forces their chaotic system to eventually sync up with your flow. By regulating your own energy, you create an invisible mechanism that forces the other person to subconsciously drop their hostility and match your pace. Finally, we reach the joints, the concept of degrees of freedom. A rigid person suffers from mental ankylosis. Under stress, they convince themselves there is exactly one path forward, and they will fight to the death to defend it. Your job is to act as their missing joint. By asking targeted questions, you reveal the hidden degrees of freedom they have blinded themselves to, offering space to compromise. Showing them how to bend without conceding defeat is the only reliable way to keep their fragile ego intact. When you synthesize all these anatomical principles, you achieve 2 high-level operational states, Mushin and Wu Wei. Mushin translates to the empty mind. It means your mind acts as a clear mirror, reading the opponent's structural fears without letting your own ego interfere. Wu Wei translates to effortless action. It allows you to navigate their rigidity like water flowing around a jagged rock. Instead of pushing against their resistance, Wu Wei uses their own conversational momentum to pull them precisely where you want them to go. Mastering Mushin and Wu Wei elevates you above the argument. You stop being a combative participant and become an untouchable director of the psychological flow. This brings us back to Euripides, who reportedly wrote his plays in a remote cave overlooking the sea. He understood that theater wasn't just entertainment, it was a simulation designed to train the human psyche for survival. Toxic people are rarely defeated by blunt force. They are disarmed when you remain organically flexible, creating a mirror that forces them to see the consequences of their own errors. By letting the natural laws of psychological gravity do the work, we adopt an ancient, timeless methodology for resolving human friction.